Hello there. This PartyGate report looks childishly vindictive. So did Boris Johnson just pull a blinder? So Boris gets a PartyGate guilty verdict, and we're told that had he not resigned, he would have got a huge 90-day ban from Parliament, but also a recommendation that he should lose his parliamentary pass. But from what I've seen, the big point here is that the sanctions recommended in the report make it sound as if the committee is making an angry, juvenile, knee-jerk reaction to the criticisms from Boris and certain other MPs. And if Boris knew what was coming his way, he might have thought that getting the committee members to overreact would play into his hands. And right now, how many people who agree he deserved a guilty verdict, together with, say, a 20-day ban, will now be a little more sympathetic towards Boris Johnson? And that might percolate through to some of his former colleagues in the House of Commons. At the moment, the press and pundits seem to be assuming that Boris instantly lost his rag, threw his toys out of the cot, and his reaction therefore drew the ire of the committee. But what if it was more of a calculated response, designed to elicit an angry and over-the-top reaction from the committee? Remember, this guy did not become Prime Minister by going around angrily snapping at everyone. And right now, a lot of people are already starting to ask questions as they go through that report. Had it been more measured and in line with expectations of, say, a 20-day suspension, the story would probably have died here today, apart, of course, from the quickly diminishing Westminster rumble of the usual nonsense. But look what's happened. This report does exactly what Boris Johnson haters dread. It's kept Boris firmly front and centre of UK politics. Talk about a backfire. A backfire brought about by a seemingly angry and immature overreaching response to the Boris attacks. This is why I put forward the idea that maybe Boris was hoping for this response, and why he went right out of his way to needle the committee chair and its members. Then out comes the revelations alleging that the committee deputy chairman, Bernard Jenkin, had his own PartyGate with cake to answer for, so allowing Boris to wade right back in again. And all this keeps Boris on the front pages for a few more days. I have to say that much of this stems from allowing Harriet Harman, who has previously accused Boris Johnson of lying, to chair the Privileges Committee looking into him. Surely they should have ensured that the committee was completely squeaky clean so it can't be criticised. But they relied purely on the claim that the committee of 7 was made up of 4 Tory MPs, 2 from Labour and 1 from the SNP. And questions have been asked about how friendly those Tory MPs were towards Boris Johnson anyway. But Harriet Harman was unanimously voted in to replace Chris Bryant after he recused himself for making comments about PartyGate prior to the inquiry. So why Harriet Harman didn't do the same is jaw-dropping. And even more jaw-dropping that MPs voted her in. Didn't they realise how flawed it makes the committee look? Or didn't they care? All that's happened is that PartyGate has become PartyGate-gate. Whether you are a Boris hater or Boris supporter, or even those on the fence, you should all be angry with those clueless MPs for getting us into this position. In fact, this whole report might start to make the House of Commons and those in it look like a total joke. And just when the nation needs to be looking at economic recovery, we have a committee of MPs now being forced into the open, and they will start having to answer questions. The press will sniff a good political spat and do all they can to keep it running. And perversely, the one person who benefits from all of this is Boris Johnson. Anyone hoping that such a heavy-handed report would crush Boris and his reputation in the country could now find themselves extremely disappointed. And if Boris does end up jumping ship to, say, Reform UK, he might take a goodly amount of Tory support with him. Boris has said he was naive to think that Harriet Harman would conduct a fair inquiry. But maybe he read her a lot more accurately than we give him credit for. And the initial crows and applause at the victory of getting Boris ejected from the House might turn to long faces of a lost opportunity to quietly bury the Boris threat. When what they seem to have done is create some sort of political phoenix. And worse, given him a real platform to keep that phoenix rising. Now, the parliamentary vote on this report and its recommendations is due to take place next Monday, the 19th of June, which just happens to be Boris Johnson's 59th birthday. And with these committees being held in such high esteem in Parliament, MPs will be expected to accept it and vote it through. There will, though, be a few Boris supporters that will vote against the report. But that will probably be in the very low numbers, possibly single figures. But the only punishment that would stick would be the loss of the Boris parliamentary pass. Everything else in it has no impact on him, other than to keep him in the spotlight. And should Boris be voted back into the Commons later in the day, the report just becomes one for the archives. Anyway, whether by anger or by design, Boris is still right in the political mix. And given the talk that he wants a way back into the Commons, he will try to keep that one alive until his next big move. And that might be quite soon. But what that is, who knows? Now, there are growing concerns that the UK is heading for a mortgage meltdown. As interest rates rise, people are coming off of previous very low rates and are being faced with huge rises in their monthly payments because mortgage rates are rising with interest rates. Mortgage brokers are saying that there is no end in sight to rising borrowing costs, and warnings are coming in that we can expect house prices to fall by as much as 25% in the next couple of years. And the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, told ITV that borrowers in the UK are going to be paying higher rates of interest for their debt for the foreseeable future. Not the news that mortgage payers will be wanting to hear. And with house prices under pressure, many mortgage lenders will be putting more onerous conditions on their products in order to protect themselves. They will be pulling their horns in. In fact, they already are. Banks are pulling rates and coming out with new higher-priced deals all the time. And one of the really big issues here is that many people leverage themselves to the hilt because of all the previous cheap borrowing out there. Their level of debt is probably on the verge of breaking them as rates rise. And the level of wage rises is also causing concern because this will help keep inflation at higher than normal levels for quite some time to come. Something that will put even more downward pressure on the housing market. And the government is acutely aware of this, with the PM Rishi Sunak trying to order the mortgage lenders to go easy on those struggling to meet their mortgage payments. It looks like things are going to get more difficult for mortgage holders going forwards.